Hello and welcome to the Two Guys, One Roto Show. Today, we'd like to discuss with you a prospect look back. We're going to look at MLB Pipeline's top 30 from 2020 and kind of see where are they now. And this is in no way meant to either promote or shame or anything in between the work that the folks over at MLB Pipeline are doing. Rather, it's just a way to talk about a certain subset of top prospects from 5 years ago, see how they're doing these days. As always, our show is brought to you by FantasySixPack.net, and we have another special guest for you today. First off, though, I'd like to promote our Fantasy Six-Pack series that we've got going on at FantasySixPack.net. It's free league against analysts from Fantasy Six-Pack, BaseballHQ, Pitcher List, many more, and the winner gets a trophy, pretty cool trophy from Trophy Smack. So check that out for sure. It's hosted by Fantrax. Can't promote Fantrax enough. As a matter of fact, if you move your league over to Fantrax, you can sign up for free. It's fantrax.com/fantasy six-pack. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or the Apple or Spotify podcast, whatever you're listening to us on. Like this video or audio wherever you listen. You can follow us on Twitter and on Blue Sky. I'm at DW the Original, and my co-host is Rich Sayre. Rich, hello.
Welcome. Glad to be back. R Sayre 04 if you want to shout at me.
There you go. And we're keeping it local for me anyway for this episode. So I'd like to welcome to the show our guest from North Georgia, Mr. Chris Blessing. Chris, hello.
Hey, what's up, guys? How are you?
Excellent. How are you, sir?
Doing pretty good. Ready to talk.
Chris has come prepared with props and everything. I don't know how I feel about this. I'm a little intimidated.
It's a strikeout wildfire smoky ball giveaway that I just use as a
That's fantastic.
Ball.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
So striking out wildfire, good thing. There you go. So all right. So yes, we're promoting good social causes on this network as well. All right, so we're going to dive right into it. The prospect, I guess, again, this is the MLB Pipeline's top 30 prospects. 30 is no specific number, just kind of the number I arbitrarily chose to cut us off at from 2020, so from 5 years ago. So you would hope within 5 years that most of these folks would have, reached the majors by now and at least given some sort of contribution. Some of them have, some of them have less so, and we're going to talk about that and kind of their journeys and where they may have succeeded or may have less than succeeded.
Some kind of idea what trajectory we're on, right? That's
give us an idea of the trajectory. Exactly. We're going to do it in inverse order. We have them subsetted from either negative WAR players, 0 to 5 WAR players, 5 to 10 WAR players, and then 10 plus WAR players. And these are all based on Fangraphs WAR. And Chris is going to be able to shed some light, of course, on their prospect journey and us maybe some on their fantasy journey. So we're going to dive right into it with the lower tier players, unfortunately, the ones who have maybe not achieved quite as much as they might have liked. But I'll now link to this sheet on this Google sheet on the show page so that if you want to check it out for yourself, you're welcome to. If you have that much time on your hands, I feel sorry for you. But so the negative WAR or the 0 to negative WAR players, I'm just going to list them all. And then Chris, why don't you dive in with a couple that you want to talk about, and Rich, you too. So they are Joe Adell, Nate Pearson, Christian Pache, Brendan McKay, Andrew Vaughn, Forrest Whitley, Carter Kieboom, and Luis Patino. So all of these guys, for what it's worth, all but Pache and Patino were not number one picks, but first round draft picks. And Pache was a pretty big bonus baby, $1.4 million in 2015. Patino less, $130,000 in 2016. But bottom line is that of this subset of 9 players, I think. Eight players, excuse me. 7 of them were, at least pretended to be either for, like I said, first round picks, players you would have high hopes for. So what do we got, folks? You guys talk about it.
Well, I'll start out with, first guy is Brendan McKay, left-handed pitcher, Rays organization, went to the University of Louisville, was drafted as a two-way player. It was one of those things where, early on, I was like, I don't know if this dude's a two-way player. His statistics in his draft year were like he never faced the Friday starter. In college baseball, the Friday starter is the number one guy. Well, he was the number one guy at Louisville.
Right.
So he never faced the top pitcher. And then he just absolutely destroyed what you would call the weekday starter, which would be your fourth, fifth, and sixth starter in your rotation. But looking at his stats in a microcosm for the rest of the weekend, especially that Saturday against the number two guy, he didn't do that well. So like I thought it was kind of an inflated thing. I mean, his stats were great. I saw him as a pitcher only. That's kind of how I graded him out. That's what he ended up being. Then he shredded his shoulder, and then he shredded his shoulder again. And apparently he's healthy. So might be able to get out of this range. I don't know. I always kind of saw him as not the biggest upside starter. I kind of saw him as a mid-tier type starter. He was very much a high floor pitcher. So it made sense, the draft pick, and it made sense, all of that kind of stuff. Right. He was fourth overall in an okay draft. But like overall, like it's disappointing. And some guys are on this list that are in that realm. I saw a lot of Christian Pache. Okay. And I'll be honest, I was fooled. A lot of the talk back then, they were both in the Braves organization, and we'll get to Drew Waters in a second because he's in that next tier. But it was Waters, Pache, Waters, Pache. I always thought that Pache, and I think that people, if you're a non-fantasy, if you're looking at non-fantasy list, they're including defense. Christian Pache in the minor leagues looked like a 7 defender on a 2 to 8 scale. So like he was a plus defender. There's a lot of value in that, especially in center field and that sort of thing. He, of course, slowed down a bit. Just wasn't as good of a defender. Not enough to carry that position. And man, he could not hit his batting weight once he got to the upper levels into the big leagues. It just was not really a fantasy-driven type profile. It was all on the defense. And so like for fantasy, Drew Waters was the better prospect, but it wasn't by much. And I mean, we'll get to him in a second. And I guess the last one, and this is what we always see, we see the gas guys. That's what I like to call them, the Nate Pearsons of the world that get, and like currently we've seen the one Brewers prospect, Mizorowski, kind of like just keep falling down the list. Like,
I saw him in person in Biloxi not too long ago, but just, I mean, not that I'm a scout or anything, but the way he throws gas.
And like that's a hard one. Is we still put a huge value on gas and breaking pitches, but like and nasty breaking pitches, which he has. But the issue with Mizorowski and the issue with Pearson is they're not command guys; they're throwers, and throwers don't tend to survive in today's game. So like the Pearsons, like those are the kind of the three guys that I really wanted to focus on. The injury risk, the guy that whole profile was carried by defense to the levels he was at, which was Pache, and then that gas guy, Pearson. The other misses on that list were just misses. I don't know what the heck happened to Andrew Vaughn. I can't tell you.
Yeah. So I can tell you just for what it's worth. I just recently did a little fantasy write-up anyway for Fantasy Six Pack and mentioned Andrew Vaughn and talked about how he doesn't, hasn't really hit for the power that was expected. He hasn't hit for the average. What he does well is absolutely nothing. He doesn't field well. He doesn't run the bases well. He doesn't hit for power. He doesn't hit for average. So yeah, like you said, but he was the third overall pick of the draft. Certainly was high expectations in the industry and across, prospectdom and all that stuff and whatever. Rich, who you got for us, bud?
Yeah, I was going to just tag on a little bit with Andrew Vaughn. Like, certainly you have the profile, be careful with your righty college first baseman. And he's not the one, he's not the first one to drive that profile. But, I mean, he really drove the bus a little way on that. When I was looking at him, it was kind of shocking. I mean, obviously he had the great college career, but kind of shocking to me in retrospect that he went right into the majors in 21. Lost the year with COVID. There was no minor league play that year, but didn't really excel in the minors before that in A ball. And you would expect a college hitter that's going to excel to do well in A ball. So that was kind of confusing to me. Like the White Sox weren't as horrific as they are today. So to have him jump right into the majors after that lost COVID year, I mean, maybe that's a factor in all this. I think
wasn't that
COVID,
I'm sorry, wasn't that part of the Al Avila, like trying to save his job thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a story that comes up a little bit here with this draft class is
Right.
the COVID development. But Andrew Vaughn, I got to say, I'm still in on Nate Pearson. I have some value as a bullpen arm this year. At least that's what I'm holding out hope for. So maybe he can move up a little bit this year, looking for that command. The big miss for me in this group was Forrest Whitley. Like, there was a point in time, I think, where he was the number one pitching prospect, somewhat universally regarded. And then just never had the performance in the pros. So, you had all these plus pitches and you think you're going to have plus command based on this and that, and it just never materialized.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's Forrest Whitley, if I'm not mistaken. Again, this is not in no way, shape, or form meant to pick on anybody's work because, everybody's got their hits and their misses and all that stuff. But I believe Baseball Prospectus had Forrest Whitley as their number one overall prospect one year in the book.
I kind of remember that. And then, just to touch on Pache again, I was looking back, like, what's the sentiment at the time, shortly after the draft. And somebody that I love to read their work, had tagged him as being like a potential WAR guy with the highest ceiling in the Braves system outside of Kevin Maician. So, like, oops. Not the easiest task to evaluate teenagers. So, it was interesting to look back at some of these.
One thing I'll add, Whitley's highest ranking among every ranking service was number 5.
It was number 5, okay.
2019 by the Baseball America Prospectus had him at 7 that year, and 2019 was 7 for Pipeline. But there's a lot with Whitley that, like, we can't really talk about, or I can't talk about things that I know about the situation, about what the Astros. Man, he had the stuff. He literally had 4 plus pitches or better potential, and got really close, and then just could never get past that next level, which was the major leagues. Never could get there, and then finally,
that's it, right?
Showed up. Yeah,
it's the great divider, and the guys who can do it every day versus the guys who can do it most days, kind of thing. So. We will leave Joe Adell, Carter Kieboom, and Luis Patino for somebody else to pontificate about and move on to the next group, which is a larger group. It is a group of 13 players. And again, I'm just going to run down the list. Rich, I'm going to give the floor to you first this time, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's great.
But this list of players, again, this is players who've accrued anywhere between 0.1 and 4.9 WAR so far this in their soon-to-be illustrious careers, we hope. But Casey Mize, Royce Lewis, Jared Kelenic, Joey Bart, Dylan Carlson, Michael Kopech, Sixto Sanchez, positive way anyway. All right. Dustin May, Matt Manning, CJ Abrams, the aforementioned Drew Waters, JJ Bleday, and Brendan Rodgers. So, Rich, why don't you pick a couple guys to talk about?
The thing that jumped out to me about this tier was how many players had what I thought as health being the major determining factor in kind of how they were not able to progress in their career. And so you're looking at Casey Mize, Royce Lewis, Michael Kopech, Sixto Sanchez, Dustin May, Matt Manning. Just a lot of, we see a little bit the talent could be there. We're in positive WAR. So something went right at some point, but, missed time with injury or, derailed the progress of the career or both. So that's kind of what stuck out to me. You've got other guys in here. Kelenic, for me, I wrote down, less than the sum of his parts. Ended up that he can't hit lefties, has some trouble with contact overall, difficulty lofting the ball. So that just never panned out the way we thought it might. Waters, we were talking about earlier. I'd like to hear what Chris has to say about that. For me, when I was looking at that, I didn't certainly pick up at the time back in 2017, but all his BABIPs across all levels were very high. And, it seems like that's the way it's going to be in general in minor leagues. The defense is not as good, obviously, as in the pros. So you see that a lot. But outside of that, there wasn't a lot there that was going to translate into the pro game. So that's a couple of the things that I noticed when I was looking at this group of players.
Yep, fair enough. Chris, what you got, bud?
Let's start with the obvious. The best player on this list currently is Royce Lewis. Please stay healthy. He's the only guy worth rostering, I think, on this list, unless you want to go to the casino with CJ Abrams. So
easy, too soon.
Yeah, easy, too soon. I mean, I'm not going to be up all night, but he can be. The Casey Mize thing, it was a concern by a few of the evaluators that I spoke to going into that draft about some potential arm issues. I'm very hesitant now because of the Casey Mizes and because of other guys that come out of the college ranks with splitters. And the reason for that is most college programs don't take care of the guy's arm, especially when they throw a splitter. And that's a huge concern. It's a huge red flag, something that I'm concerned about. But I'm not concerned when it's a Japanese player. I'm not concerned about it because I feel like, coming from the Far East, I feel like that they're managed a lot better when it comes to that sort of thing. So it's a lot of where the development of that pitch happened. And there was some delivery issues with that. There were some delivery issues with Matt Manning. My understanding is Sixto Sanchez didn't have the best workout regime in the world. I mean, man, that guy was nasty. I got to see him at his top. Joey Bart, who's the number 2 pick in that Casey Mize draft.
Speaking of keeping it local.
Joey Bart was a kid that I saw a bunch at Georgia Tech, and there was hit tool concerns even then. Everybody bought the power. It hasn't really translated. He was a decent receiver, but he wasn't a great receiver. I think that's one of the things that I believe has gotten better in evaluation is catching and defense specifically. It used to be, who has a strong arm? That's the best catching prospect. No, that's not usually the case. Usually it's the guy that moves, has the agility behind home plate. We'll go on CJ Abrams a little. Got to see him in high school. Another local guy was at Trinity High School. Just a heck of an athlete. I was always I was a little apprehensive of ever really going all in on him. He had a great debut, and that was one of the reasons he got pushed up so high in that 2020 ranking. Going to the Drew Waters, he was a guy that I saw, another local guy, want to say Etowah High School. I'm not 100% sure. Atlanta area. Saw him. He got caught up in the whole copy scandal with the Braves. I believe he received a car. I'm not 100% sure. It's out there. I'm not giving any inside information or anything. Heck of an athlete. Kind of had a little bit of Lenny Dykstra, will run through the wall type deal in high school. I was never enamored by the hit tool. And you hit it on the head right there, Rich. It was a huge BABIP guy. And it wasn't necessarily the quality of contact that I saw. He mishit a lot of pitches, and those pitches ended up that were mishit prior that went against the defense, were completely missed as he got to the upper levels. So like he was a guy that took advantage of everybody playing pull on him and him hitting pitches because he was late or anything like that. And the last guy I kind of want to touch on again, Michael Kopech, same dude, same Nate Pearson thing. Throws hard. He was up to 105 or 103 or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
And everybody bought in. Fine relief prospect, but like don't be spending capital on these guys.
No doubt.
This is a guy that you pick off the waiver wire about 2 years after they debut because now they're finally in the role they're supposed to be in and may actually excel like you're hoping for Nate Pearson this year and like he has in other roles. So like just be aware of that. Especially when you see those guys get pumped up like that.
An ongoing debate between a good friend of mine and I is that the most important for fantasy, the most important stat for pitching prospects right now is innings pitched. Give me the guy whose organization is trusting him to go out there and throw 5, 6, maybe even 7 innings and start. That means that they expect him to be a starter. The guy who's giving me Jacob Mizorowski, who's giving me 3 1/3 with 8 strikeouts. So it's just not going to play. That's just never going to stretch out to be a 5, 6 inning guy. So anyway.
we talked about Noah Schultz on the Fantasy 6-Pack Challenge, whatever that with Rich last week. And like that's one of my fears with him. I keep on seeing a tall Josh Hader because like Josh Hader was basically developed that way where it was very short outings and stuff. And yes, Hader had the stuff to start, but like when you're treating a guy with kids gloves, it's a scary thing. So like I had mentioned last week that Noah was the hardest rank that I had on my top 100. I didn't know where he fit. I just put him somewhere. I knew he was maybe the best left-handed arm. But I'll be honest, I like Thomas White a lot better because he's actually going deeper in games.
There you go. Yeah. Fair enough. So interestingly enough, that same friend of mine is trying to trade for Thomas White. So there's another story altogether. But anyway, that has nothing to do with anything. Nobody cares. We've reached more or less midway point of the show. Chris, you're on here from
I was going to ask one other thing. There's one guy in this group that
Rich.
No, all good. Which is Brendan Rodgers. And a lot of these guys, you look back and you say, okay, maybe we should have seen this, or this is why this didn't work out. I didn't really see a thing with him where the minor league performance seemed very positive in a lot of different ways. And he's never hit above 100 WRC or above 98 WRC plus in the pros. So I didn't know if anybody else has a different perspective on what happened there. He did have the shoulder issue, but even before that, he wasn't hitting great in the majors.
Well, never trust Rockies position prospects, because all they do is play in bandboxes all the time.
Yeah.
Every stadium they currently play in, every stadium that he played in, like Asheville, Grand Junction, Hartford, Lancaster, Albuquerque. I mean, Albuquerque, it's criminal to send pitchers there because it's dangerous to their development. A lot of that, and that Fool's Gold has been around for a long time. I remember Ian Stewart hitting 30 plus bombs in Asheville and everybody was on him. And Ian Stewart made it to the big leagues, was a regular player for a while, but he wasn't necessarily that. I think the performance issues that we've seen have been more about the back, if not anything else. But I don't think he was ever born to be a power hitter. And I think people saw that sort of thing and were like, all right, yeah, that's what he is. I thought he was going to be a better hit tool. It turns out that the injuries not really allowed it. But I mean, then again, batting to 268 in today's game is kind of a plus batting average. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So a lot of these guys, I guess to your point, I think, Chris, you said this, a lot of these guys in this particular subsector are maybe tweener guys, at least among the hitters or whatever. Drew Waters, JJ Bleday, Brendan Rodgers, Dylan Carlson, they're no necessarily carrying tool among them. And when you lack a carrying tool, big league pitchers tend to find a way to get you out. So I don't know, whatever. Bryce Lewis, for what it's worth, is my heartbreak on this list. He was the number 1 overall pick. Absolutely love the guy coming out of high school. And Chris, do you remember who the number 2 pick in that 17 draft was by any chance?
No, I don't know offhand.
No, yeah, because I remember the Twins, if I remember correctly, took him as a save money for the bonus pool to sign players later, kind of thing, whatever. But anyway, Royce Lewis in the now it's been this will be 8 years since his draft year, has played 152 career games in the major leagues, which 152 is not a full big league season in 8 years, so that's disappointing. So we'll see. Maybe he gets it all together, and like you said, to your point, Chris, stays healthy this year and wins an MVP. Certainly not out of the question, but his rate line stats at least somewhat regressed last year, although who knows, maybe it was due to injury, hard to say. So anyway, bottom line is Royce Lewis, please stay healthy and have a great year. I was going to say before, Chris, you are on here visiting us from good folks at BaseballHQ.
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit what you do when you're not chatting with us about baseball?
Well, I am the director of prospect analysis at BaseballHQ.com. I do a podcast every week during the season called the Eyes Have It podcast. It's all I call it first person views of players, meaning you're at the ballpark. As opposed to watching video or being an analyst, there's nothing wrong with that. I watch a lot of video. But it's just interesting to talk about what's happened at the ballpark, talk about those things. I have a lot of guests throughout the year. I don't have anything planned right now. It starts in early March. I have 3 episodes planned, but it's kind of to see who gets out to the ballpark first, whether they're going to be on my show early or not.
Okay.
I also write an article once a week in the Eyes Have It series. I also just kind of manage what's going on. We're going to have content, minors content every day, articles, narratives on Tuesday, and then my stuff on Friday. Also got books out right now. The Baseball Forecaster, got some write-ups in there this year, some player boxes. Also, the Minor League Baseball Analyst and Lindy's Baseball Preview, which is available on newsstands right now.
There you go. Fantastic. Yeah, Baseball Forecaster. I mean, all the publications are great, but Baseball Forecaster I can't recommend highly enough if you're a fantasy player, especially, say, in redraft or in shallow prospect pools or whatever. Just absolutely an invaluable resource. Rich actually introduced me to the annual Once Upon a Time Many Moons Back. And I have a rather large stack of them sitting in my closet because, I refuse to get rid of them. Yeah. So
the off season, I think it comes out early. You can pour through that and your holidays or whatever, you get the PDF now. So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Thanksgiving week is when that PDF comes out. Yep. I had to write up until a week before that. The player stuff gets done around whenever first pitch is, which is usually the first week in November. First pitch Arizona is the big event that we put on every year in the Phoenix area. A great baseball weekend for anybody that wants in sometime. And then the other thing is then there's leading up to it, making sure your lists are right, making sure guys are still in those organizations, all of that stuff. It's kind of chaos. I don't know how the editors handle it. I just have a small role in it. I know how crazy I go for the MLBA because I am an associate editor for that one, and I always the Rule 5 is just a panic day for me because I'm do we have these guys written up? And if we do or don't, if we don't, I want to look at them do we really care to have that write up or not?
Right.
So there's a lot of panic for me during that part of the year.
No doubt. So, all right, so we'll transition into the next pool of players. Now, these are going to be your players who've pretty much made a good name for themselves. These are 5+ 5 to 10 win players. These prospects is only a pool of 5 players. 3 of them were first round picks. One of them was a huge bonus baby, and one of them was the 94th pick overall in his draft. So all highly regarded players. 4 of the 5 we're going to talk about a little bit, and one of the 5 we're going to purposely not talk about very much. So the players are Alec Bohm, Jesus Luzardo, MacKenzie Gore, Gavin Lux, and the aforementioned, well, not aforementioned, but the previously not to be mentioned Wander Franco. So Wander Franco, his story is well documented. We don't really need to get into great detail about what happened with him. I will say that I'm an avid listener to Effectively Wild podcast, and Eric Longenhagen from Fangraphs, I think is the only 80 grade prospect he's ever given. And he referred to him as, quote, pretty much perfect. That turned out to be pretty much not true, although not from a baseball sense.
Wow.
He did accrue 9.4 wins across 1,100 plate appearances, pretty darn good. But that career abruptly ended, and I think we probably better just as well leave it at that.
Yeah, I don't know how we didn't figure this out when he was in Princeton, West Virginia.
Right, yes.
For those that know, there's a strip club in West Virginia that a lot of players got caught up in.
Oh God! Well, that's more information to turn my stomach. All right, so we got 4 other players: Gavin Lux, MacKenzie Gore, Luzardo, and Bohm. You guys want to chat about those guys some?
I'll start out, and I'll start out with Alec Bohm, only because my orthopedic surgeon, who just did my Achilles surgery, and I talk about him almost every appointment that I have.
Okay.
Big Phillies fan. I'm very close to a scout that was area scout in this area for 2018, 2017. And like his thing with Alec Bohm has actually come true. His thinking was he'd come into the league, probably be a high batting average guy, which there's been times in his career that he's had that high average pretty much his whole career now. But the element that he thought would never come would be the power.
Right.
And essentially the draft pick and the rankings were based off of a guy who was 6'5", 218 pounds.
Yep.
And he didn't think that this guy that even pro coaching could get that swing to elevate the ball enough. I think it was funny that Alec Bohm was in the home run derby last year for a guy that is really strong, and he's a really strong guy. Like that's like the worst possible place to put this guy. Like this guy is not a home run hitter. He hits the ball hard. I guess I don't have those metrics. I don't really follow Major League Baseball other than to see if I'm like right about guys or if I'm wrong about guys. But like the scouting report I got from that area scout has been spot on, even to the defense too. Like, I mean, he had this guy pegged, and the good thing is my buddy's in greener pastures right now, doing great in his career. So like he really called that. I'll touch on one other guy too. I saw a bunch. I saw some, not a bunch, but I saw some in MacKenzie Gore. We had elevated him almost to the same place that we elevated Forrest Whitley.
Okay.
And what really kind of struggled here was once he was really kind of looked over, and this is not a slight towards Padres prospects. Padres scouts are phenomenal, especially on the amateur side at finding tools. Like for every James Wood, there's a list of guys that we can't even name anymore because like we've forgotten about them. But they find tools better than anyone. Their development hasn't been that great, and even on like their pro scouting side, they do really well. And like they're very they might be the last true scouty organization. Maybe the Nationals too. Rizzo's a scout at heart and stuff. But they're the last like true scout thing. They're not as model driven as every other team and all that stuff. So I hate to say this, but I tend to discount Padres prospects because of that. And it's because of lessons from MacKenzie Gore, lessons from so many guys that unless they get into a better situation, which right now, I'm just going to say the Nationals actually are developing some pitchers. Like they've figured out something with their development, and Gore's young enough to maybe still get something out of that. But we saw it with Max Fried. I mean, Max Fried got out of that organization, and look at what he ended up becoming. Like,
Yeah.
So I always had Gore as kind of a mid-rotation guy once I saw him. I just think sometimes we put these expectations on these guys that do have all these tools, but they're not in the right development situation to get all of that out.
Yeah.
And this is a case I believe was the situation. And like for every guy like James Wood, it didn't matter who was developing him. Like it just didn't matter who,
Sure.
you know. Juan Soto, those guys don't matter who develops them, you know.
Right.
It's the Bryce Harpers of the world. Like this kid needed some more, and he didn't have it. Hopefully, he can get a little more now that the Nationals seem to have figured out pitching.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, he's still young enough to whatever. I feel like I read something where his last 8 or 9 starts last year, obviously small sample size abound, but maybe he turned the corner a little bit. Who knows? It's hard to say, but still have high hopes for MacKenzie Gore, but we shall see. Rich, Chris has left you with Gavin Lux, a personal favorite, I know, and Luzardo. Why don't you talk about those two guys, bud?
Yeah, so Gavin Lux is, when I was looking back at the sequence of everything, you kind of wonder, like, why was this guy so ranked so highly? Like, he had a good season in the PCL and AAA, which was again driven by a pretty high BABIP. But outside of that, never really put up much power. Doesn't have great speed. Doesn't play good defense. Got moved off a shortstop. Doesn't play great second base defense, it seems like, either. So it was just one of those things. I guess I don't know what it was. He got caught up at the time, but like he's actually kind of the prospect that people should have expected him to be. But there was this period of time where he was thought of as the next big hitting thing. So
he was the to your point, Rich, he was the number 2 ranked prospect on this list overall.
Yeah, and like he's perfectly fine, I guess. He's played a few years now in the bigs, and he's got close to 6 WAR, so that's nice, especially when most of it is offense. And I mean, as far as projecting the hitting, but that's what I was looking at with Lux. I was going to jump back to Bohm for a second because I'm fascinated by this. In that you sometimes hear people say, well, it's an easy swing adjustment to add some loft or whatever. And I guess sometimes it is. Chris, we were talking about Christian Campo last week and how he was able to do that. But then I always think back to guys like an Eric Hosmer, where, you were always expecting or we were always told at the time, this goes back a number of years, like the power's going to come. He's a big guy. He's got a strong swing. And he just almost never was able to lift the ball to get to any of that power in games. So, and that's what it looked like looking back at Bohm. Yeah, like you said, people were projecting that might happen, and it just hasn't really happened.
Yeah.
A lot of so first off, the Lux thing, I'm guilty. I ranked him super high. I got to see him in Nashville, just absolutely destroy, and that's where recency bias comes into play. That's something that we really I think now even now we struggle with recency bias, especially with these prospect lists and stuff. We're better at it because we're getting exit velocities, we're getting a lot of different things, whether you guys see that in the public sphere or my source stuff that sometimes gets out there by different other media outlets. I try not to be one of those people that leaks that type of stuff. But going back to that hitting adjustment, everybody always believes that. But I'll ask people, well, I did this at First Pitch Arizona this last year. Well, what do you think the adjustment is? Well, he needs to change the trajectory of his swing. And like, well, how does he do that? And they can't answer because it's, are they going to drop their hands? Well, if they drop their hands, then they probably become top hand heavy and probably lose a lot of the flexibility in their swing. So you don't want that. So you'll hear that, or hey, maybe they need to cock their hands back. Well, there's some energy that's created by cocking your hands back, and some guys can't start back there with little trigger. Some guys just need bigger trigger, but most of the time the issue is from the lower half. Like that's where the issue is. And I'll just be honest. I think that's the hardest thing to adjust. You can adjust. You can smooth out a hitch. Like hitches are terrible. You can. I don't know if arm bars are hard to deal with. To just be honest with you, but hitches and bat wraps, you can do a little bit of work on that. Yandy Diaz is the poster child of like the success story, where he was able to get enough lift. I mean, he was a negative lift guy before he went with the Rays, and the Guardians are well known for their development. They couldn't get that out of him. But like that took a lot. I look at Josh Jobe with the Rangers. Like he was a guy that he needed to pull the ball to get to more power. Now we'll see if that's able to be done, full time, as he gets into his big league career and stuff. But like all of his power was to the opposite field for so long, they had to work on the lower half. And you hear that a lot when you're talking to hitting coaches. You're also hearing that when you're talking to players. Like I don't want to steal somebody's. I like to sometimes follow around guys while they interview them. I ask them, I'm like, hey dude, can I follow you around and stuff? And like I got to talk to Royce Lewis a few years ago because I like hung out with Eno Saris, and like Eno and I drove to the ballpark together and all of that kind of stuff. And I was like, can I just follow you around? Like that's what I want to do. And so like speaking with the science, it's always about getting the backspin. That's what they're talking about a lot of the times. And it's usually talking about getting leverage in their lower half to be able to do their swing, to swing the way that they need to get that extra loft going and that sort of thing. And it's easier said than done. And like in my career, it's much easier to smooth out a trigger, which is not an easy thing, than to get to lift when your legs are trying to do the absolute opposite of what they want you to do.
Kind of like piggybacking on the James Wood point that you made, Chris, with the Padres. For every James Wood, there's a million non-James Woods that we didn't hear about or whatever. So for every I feel like the poster child for the lift era was Chris Taylor. He was kind of like the first guy who left Seattle, and the Dodgers taught him how to lift the ball, and all of a sudden he made $1 million, and more than $1 million. He made tens of millions of dollars as the Dodgers utility guy. He's still hanging around that roster, whatever. But so for every Chris Taylor, there's a million Jake Taylors, which nobody's going to get that reference, but I enjoyed it, the Major League reference. So, but anyway, so.
Can I throw out one other name that just it's not on our list, but a guy that was really highly ranked, and everybody was like, well, he'll get to power eventually. Austin Martin of the Twins. Like I had him so far off my list after like seeing him in pro ball that like that first offseason, like everybody else was ranking him high, but like talking to evaluators, they did not believe, even the angles that he was his best launch angles were to the opposite field gap. And that dude is not an opposite field gap power hitter. Like that's a bad place for Austin Martin to hit the ball. Like that is the worst possible place for him. Because if then they start playing him that way, what is he? I mean, he's just a singles hitter, which is what he's pretty much been.
No doubt. Austin Martin was personal fave once upon a time out of Vandy, and
never trust Vandy position players.
Well, hey, there's Brian Reynolds or somebody else I'm forgetting, I'm sure. But
JJ Bleday, who we didn't talk about.
Oh, JJ Bleday, yes, that's true. Yeah, yep. But anyway, Austin Martin was definitely a personal fave, and now he has developed into like maybe one of the better 26th men on anybody's roster, which is not the outcome the Twins were hoping for. So,
I mean, the Twins got him kind of at a discount because like it was a bad draft by the Blue Jays, and then they didn't do anything with him.
So, all right, so we'll move into our last four. Now, these four prospects, they were ranked 3rd, 4th, 10th, and 18th, so all inside the top 18. One of them was a 1-1 pick. One of them was a 1-2 pick. One of them was a pretty good bonus baby, $1.75 million as an amateur free agent, and one of them was an international free agent signee as $52 million out of Cuba, which is Luis Robert Jr., which certain prospect evaluators decide whether or not to even rank these guys as prospects because they're professionals coming over from other professional leagues. But ultimately, Pipeline did have them ranked 3rd, so we're going to talk about them. So we got 2 and 2. So you guys pick. Rich, I think Chris led off last time, so why don't you pick who you want to talk about first, bud?
Yeah, so I mean, this is nice. We're talking about successes rather than what went wrong. The two guys that I thought was interesting when I was looking at this was you just mentioned Luis Robert. So I think he was one of the last ones, or maybe the last one that came over before they kind of changed that rule and put the bonus levels down a little bit. But at 19 when he came over, so he was still in that prospect range, not like a Sasaki coming over at 24, 25. Tool shed type of guy, speed and power. To me, I was looking at the numbers again. It seems like he just kind of bullied his way, overpowered players in the minors. Always had really rough chase rates, outside zone contact rates. And he is a guy that I think had some success early, but hasn't made adjustments as kind of pitchers have adjusted to him over time. So I'd like to see where that goes. Had a little bit of a rough year last year, but if you were on the White Sox, I think a lot of people had a rough year last year.
Yeah.
And then the other guy, similar-ish, Julio Rodríguez.
I knew you were going to pick him.
This was, I think, one of the first players that kind of popularized or revitalized the Seattle Latin pipeline. So kind of interesting story there. And they've had a lot of success with that as the years have gone by. Same thing, to me, just crushed the minors, had too much talent, too much power for the minors, but seems to have similar type of issues, maybe recognizing and not chasing on breaking balls. If you've chatted with me in any of these formats or read any of my work, I've been a little bit of a downer on Julio Rodríguez from a fantasy perspective. Wonderful defender. I think he's a wonderful real baseball player. Haven't seen like a lot of people saying he's going to take that next step. I don't know what the basis of that is other than that he's young. One of the things I did notice when I was digging into the numbers here is that he's hit significantly better on the road the past 2 seasons. That didn't hold up his rookie year, but maybe there is something to some of those site issues, especially with breaking balls in Seattle's home park, which is a killer pitcher's park.
So most extreme ballpark in the majors, actually, more so than Coors Field.
Yeah, so those two guys kind of stood out to me as similar-ish when I didn't have that thought process going in.
Okay, fair enough.
All right.
Chris, what do you got for us, buddy?
Well, I'm glad that he left Bobby Witt Jr. to talk about because that was really the only one I really wanted to talk about. So, going several years before the draft, we heard about Bobby Witt Jr. The man, everything about him was like, this guy's a major league player. Dad, former pitcher. His 3 brother-in-law. His 3 sisters married future major leaguers. And this guy was going to be a major leaguer. And we literally look at his baseball reference page and it's like relative brother-in-law of Zach Neal, brother-in-law of James Russell, brother-in-law of Cody Thomas, son of Bobby Witt. Come on, it's crazy. All the women of this family are married to major, former major leaguers or current major leaguers. It's crazy. Anyway, he was so on the level for so long that people started talking themselves out of, is Bobby Witt Jr. really this good? And that's something that ends up happening in even org ball. Like sometimes you analyze somebody so much, you start finding their weaknesses. And you start seeing weaknesses that don't necessarily exist.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's what kind of happened to Bobby Witt Jr. I felt like he was the top player in that draft. I know he was drafted number 2 behind Adley Rutschman, the other guy that we'll be talking about in a second. But like he had clear superstar caliber tools. And I'll be honest, I think that the Orioles made the wrong decision, but the Orioles were trying to contend a lot sooner than when they thought Witt Jr.'s timeline was going to be ready and stuff. But yeah, hit tool, power, speed. You can't find many better players out there right now.
No.
It's existed for a while. I mean, let's go all the way back to freshman year in high school. This existed. Number 2, the second guy you gave me is Adley Rutschman, switch hitter, was a college player. I think what's really curious on this list, at least looking at the 2 last lists, how few of college players were on it as successful guys.
Yeah,
okay?
That's a good point.
Adley and Alec Baum, and we kind of talked about Alec Baum being kind of a disappointment. Adley Rutschman has been kind of a disappointment, and he's still pretty good. Does that make sense?
It does.
It does, because we expected a 6-hit tool and 6 power, and out of the catching position, and his high in home runs so far is 20, and his batting average, 277 is probably a plus hitter in today's game. So all right, good deal. And he was getting on base until last year. It just kind of sunk. I will be very interested in seeing what your 4 will be for him. Will this be the coming out party finally? Because that's what we've been waiting for. We've been waiting for a coming out party. This is a good hitting catcher. We thought he'd be a superstar catcher, and that just hasn't come yet. And defensively, he's really, really strong, and we don't really care about that in fantasy. But I don't know if he's playing too much. Could be one of those things. 154 games, age 25 season. Even if you're DHing some, that's a little excessive for a catcher.
Yeah.
I understand wanting his bat in there and all of that kind of stuff, but you do have to treat him like a catcher still. Let's get him around 140 games, and I bet that these numbers are all
great stats. Yeah, that's interesting. Adley was my still when I wrote my Dynasty articles for Fantasy Six Pack, I still had Adley ranked as the number 1 Dynasty catcher for fantasy baseball, even above William Contreras and others, just based on the pedigree and based on he did have I believe if I remember correctly, it was a thumb injury, got hit by a errant swing or something like that or whatever, and just wasn't the same player. It was just atrocious afterwards. And really, really good prior to. It was something like 300, 380, 520 prior to getting hit by this pitch or whatever it was. And then go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're either when you have a hand injury, either you become a very high batting average guy, or you just fall off.
Right.
I always remember Willie Randolph won a batting title the year that he hurt his wrist. And I remember him talking about that, why I think it was 91, it was with the Brewers, why he won the batting title all of a sudden. He said, I couldn't swing. I literally only swung at pitches that I could put somewhere. And it made him such a good hitter. And then you have the other case where it just, finds somebody significantly.
Well, I remember Dustin Pedroia had the wrist injury the one year and completely sapped all his power, and everybody kind of jumped off the Pedroia. Well, that's the end of the little guy hitting for power, and then the next year he came back just fine. And obviously, had it not been for the ankle injury, might have had a Hall of Fame career. But anyway, But yeah, no, I'm still all aboard Team Adley. We shall see whether that's a good decision or not. And Bobby Witt Jr. certainly has well, maybe not lapped him, but is certainly well ahead of him in the.
He lapped him.
He lapped him. Okay, he lapped him. All right. But yeah, no, Bobby Witt Jr. is on the short list for best players in baseball right now, and Adley Rutschman is on the short list for best catchers in baseball right now, and that's certainly a pretty big difference. So, all right, so that concludes our list. Again, I'll link to it on the show page on the YouTube channel, and then obviously again both on Apple and on Spotify. Rich and or Chris, any closing thoughts?
Rich, you go first.
Closing time. Oh, sorry.
Risky game betting on prospects. So, always try to remember, probably 50% or more of these players you're playing the fantasy game, you're rostering minor league prospects, are going to do virtually nothing for you. So keep that in mind.
Well, harsh.
My job
give us something easier. Yes.
My job is to analyze prospects. I've been doing it since 2009. If you happen to be in a league with me that's a keeper or dynasty league, you'll see what my behavior is. Very few prospects have ever been untouchable to me. Very few. I can probably name guys that I rostered that I considered untouchable. Ronald Acuna, Vladimir Guerrero, Junior Caminero. They were the only ones. That doesn't mean other guys would have been considered that. But I didn't fret trading Michael Harris before his debut, even though he had a great rookie year and all of that kind of stuff, because I won a championship because I traded Michael Harris. Yeah. And now look at what Harris has done. It's not been a good go after that rookie year. Prospects are meant to be moved. They're meant to make your team better in dynasty and keeper leagues. In redraft leagues, you just hope that somebody just elevates them enough, that they're not in your conversation of when you get to drafting guys, because so few are good their rookie year, to be honest. Right. But that's what prospects are. They are a means to making your team good. They're not a means to hold on to. And I just looked at somebody in my home league, and it was a bunch of guys. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm talking about this. And I'll probably piss them off. But I saw guys on the list that were why are you still holding on to that guy? The Astros farm system is so weak right now.
Hey,
why are you holding on to that outfielder Barber? Are you expecting something to happen that his own organization's not really expecting to happen, but are you expecting them? Just because you read an evaluation in 2022 on Barber doesn't mean that you need to hold on to him, because here's the thing. We're wrong a lot of times, okay? There's really only 50 good prospects at any given season. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to say it. There's you can go and find lists of 400 guys. And I love those lists because you can find sleepers on there. But there's really only 50 good prospects right now. And they might not be the ones that are ranked 1 to 50. It might be number 375 or number 612. Who knows?
So that's
what it is.
Yeah, so that's actually something that Rich and I joke about a lot in our home league or whatever, that people can be beholden to, quote unquote, the list method. This guy's ranked 72nd, this guy's ranked 29th, so the 29th guy is clearly better. Well, not necessarily. Trust your instincts, trust what you've read, trust what Chris has told you, trust what Baseball America has told you, whatever you've read on Twitter, whatever you've read in scouting reports else, I don't know, whatever. Somebody that you ran into at the ballpark who sold you popcorn and told you about, I don't know.
I had a scout tell me great things about Dan Ugla, and I rostered him.
Right. But
one set of leagues because of that.
Harkening back to olden days of Baseball Prospectus, I don't know if you remember Chris, Jason Parks, but Jason Parks was their lead prospect guy for a period of time. And he always used to, kind of echoing the same sentiment you just had, he always just talked about prospects are capital. Prospects are meant to improve your team. Sometimes they'll improve your team because they'll graduate from the minors and become great players, but far more often they're going to be used to, go out and buy you whatever, a Greg Maddux on the trade market or something like that. Don't be shy about trading your prospects. Yes, you'll have the ones that you regret. If you trade away Bobby Witt Jr. And you win a title out of it, yes, you're going to say, man, I wish I hadn't traded Bobby Witt Jr. But you got a flag, you got a pennant, guys. Flags fly forever, right? So anyway, that's my kind of closing thoughts. All right, you guys have anything else before we wrap this up? No, just a hard, fast no.
A hard no.
There you go, Rich Sayre.
No, I think we covered it. Looking forward to the next show. But yeah, thanks so much.
Rich, thanks so much for stopping by, man. We really appreciate it.
In a row.
No problem.
Pleasure.
All right, have a great week, everybody, and we'll talk next week.